Hey folks, mark your calendars because on April 27th, we'll be launching our new book, which is of course titled Love as a Business Strategy. Visit loveasabusinessstrategy.com for more info and sign up for a chance to get a free copy. And if you're interested in bringing love as a business strategy to your organization, we are now offering free mini sessions of our globally resonant Seneca Leaders training experience. These mini sessions dive into 3 topics to help begin transforming leadership behaviors and influencing culture for the better. Space is limited, so visit softway.com/events to learn more and RSVP now. Enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to Love as a Business Strategy, a podcast that brings humanity to the workplace. We're here to talk about business, but we want to tackle topics that most business leaders shy away from. We believe that humanity and love should be at the center of every successful business. I'm your host, Jeff Ma, and I'm a director at Softway, a business-to-employee solutions company that creates products and offers services that help build resilience and high-performance company cultures. I am joined today by our President CEO, Mohammed Anwar. Hey, Mo.
Hey, guys.
Vice President, Chris Petrie. Hey, Chris.
Hey.
And Director Frank Dana. What's up, Frank?
Hello.
Oh, that's weird vibe on that hello, but cool. So we're gonna keep going. If you've been following the show, we're gonna continue down this fun and weird path that we've been exploring. Going through some moments in history, Softway history, if you will, talking about our own culture, our own mindsets, our own behaviors from days past, and really having an honest conversation, kind of telling the story and having an honest conversation around what was going on there and what we saw and what we've learned. Those types of things have proven really beneficial to us to re-explore and learn from. And so we thought we'd hit record on a podcast while we did it. And we welcome you to another rendition of that. So today, drum roll, please. No, just kidding. Please don't do that. We are going to talk about what we call Softway's darkest day. It's coined in quotes. It was a moment in history that I won't spoil too much because I want all of you to help tell the story. But it was definitely the day of infamy. Like if you say this to many people in the organization, they'll know exactly the day you're talking about. Many of us lived through it. And so I wanted some various perspectives on it today. And so I will kick us off. And you know what? I'm going to let Frank start us off here to set us up. What is Softway's darkest day?
Well, Softway's darkest day happened in late 2015. And it was a day where we had to lay off a significant amount of people within our company. And it was really the only time we'd ever done a mass layoff up to that point and since. Nothing else has ever happened, hence the naming convention of Softway's darkest day. But layoffs are kind of a natural part of most business operations. Like you're going to, at one point in time, potentially experience a layoff or have come from layoffs or walking into an organization that could potentially go through those. Those aren't weird. But for us and the way our layoffs were handled and the way that it was kind of structured, I think that's really where our story begins in regards to how these layoffs were followed through, and the kind of the thinking, the mindset, and the philosophy behind the way that we let a large group of our team go. And I think that's really where we should begin.
You want to popcorn over to someone, you know? You want to put your
I kind of want to popcorn to Mo. He's looking at me. He's looking down and to the side. But I want to kind of start there in terms of we were not in a good place financially as an organization. We were really not doing well. I'll set the stage again. Chris had only been a part of our organization for like 2 weeks?
2 weeks. Yep.
Up to that point. All right. So Chris was new, and his perspective is valid because he came in as a new team member and then immediately experienced this moment from that perspective also. But Mo, I want you to kind of set the stage for us, for the audience as well, in terms of like what led us to that point.
Sure. So just to kind of take it back a little bit, Softway had been in existence for almost 13 years, 12 years actually to that point. And that was over a decade of me trying to operate the company, starting off as a 20-year-old with no prior experience in the corporate workplace or running any kind of business for that matter of fact. And, we had been quite successful. So you can imagine running 12 years with no layoffs. And then you're hitting this point in 2015 where I had senior advisors and senior leaders who had joined Softway to help guide me, to help pave the way for Softway's future. Come and tell me one day that, we're not going to be able to survive at this rate financially. We're not going to be able to sustain the payroll and our expenses for how we had anticipated our market or our growth plans to go aren't going as well as they should. And so we're going to have to make some drastic steps and take some drastic decisions to ratify the situation. And they recommended to me that we have to make layoffs. And at that point in time, like I mentioned, and like how Jeff and I mentioned, we've never had to deal with this type of a situation. And for me, this is the first time that I was going into even trying to plan for a situation like this. I had heard of it. I had witnessed stories of other layoffs and organizations doing layoffs even that year. But I never thought about how it would look like at Softway. Or neither did I even have an idea how to execute these layoffs.
Yeah.
And so I that was how I was brought up to even the point of making this decision. And I can tell you that this decision that was made with a very few people, and it was very tight, like knit, and there was this burden of, which I can never forget. There was this burden of me carrying that into meetings, carrying that, walking into the office, knowing that the people that I was seeing, saying hi to, that I was walking into meetings, that they were not going to be there, a week out. And it was the worst experience for me to look at them. Some of them have had years of relationships and are working relationships together. And it was this dirty feeling of, once that decision had been made and some people's names had been picked, I can't forget, like, leading up to those days, it was really nightmarish. I couldn't sleep at night. I couldn't, it was really difficult. Like I wanted to avoid people. I wanted to not look into people's eyes. I was just afraid of, like, how do I operate in normalcy when I know that come next week, these very same people that I'm working with will not be there. Because I was told, you should never talk to anybody about this. You should never bring this up. You shouldn't give anybody even the slightest hint that this is about to happen. And it must come as a surprise. And there are legal ramifications if this is known before the day of, and you're like all these like unspoken rules that I had to follow, but yet carry that burden with me, going home every night. And it's hard for me to describe, but it was a very, very uncomfortable feeling leading up to the darkest day. I don't know. I'll stop there and we can continue forward, but it was a dirty feeling. I just felt really unclean, like I'm such a bad person, like all those feelings would go through my mind. But at the same time, there was this rational side that was fighting and saying, well, this is what you got to do. This is business. Don't take it personally. This is just the way it is. But it was a battle, internal mind battle that was going on leading up to that day. That's how I recall it.
Chris, 2 weeks into your new job here, I guess maybe we can move to the day itself, or what's your recollection of this event?
I remember I was sitting at my desk and Muhammad like walks past and he's like, Chris, you need to come with me right now. He's like, come with me, come with me right now. I was like, what's going on? He's like, let's go to the break room. And I was like, okay. Well, so like, there's like this sort of sea of people that's like walking into the break room, and it's set up for like this meeting and this announcement, right? And so I just grab a chair, and Muhammad comes in and he's like super nervous, and he just makes the announcement that, right now, the folks that are not in this room are being let go. We are, at this place in our company's history where we've had to make this hard choice. This was not easy. And you can just see sort of the wash over everybody's face, like, this is happening. And I wasn't aware of sort of how it was being handled away from us. I just knew that it was a tough conversation that Muhammad had to lead. And then people just started asking questions like, are we next? Are there going to be more layoffs? What's the company going to do about the financial situation? Is there a way out? Right? Like, the questions that you probably would think people may want to ask, but, typically don't ask in these situations. And it was just a very sort of dampened climate. People were angry. Some people were sad. Many people were doubting their own sort of, trajectory inside of the organization. It was all of that right in the air, and you could feel it. And it was super uncomfortable. And again, I was one of, I think, 3 new hires that had just come, and I couldn't help but feel like, I wonder if people are looking at me saying like, you should have not been brought here. Right? Like, I mean, you have that sort of feeling where it's like, is this because of me? Right? Like, did I sort of, was I displacing someone else? And I think that was, at least some of the sentiment that I felt from the 3 new folks. I was just like, because, we weren't told that there was anything imminent happening, of course, in the hiring process. So it was difficult from that perspective to like sit around people, because again, I didn't have deep relationships with those folks that had been like, oh, it had only been 2 weeks. I knew their names for sure, but had I worked with them, that I have like, working knowledge of how sort of they deliver and what value they brought individually, like that, I didn't have any of that context. And so, it wasn't a situation where I personally felt comfortable to like jump in and like hug people or make people feel better about the situation. But it was just this sort of purgatory of like, I'm new, I don't quite fit in. And so I'm just going to sit here and wait until somebody asks me how I'm feeling. I don't want to like intrude on what I felt like was a very, to me, much more personal moment for the people that had been here longer. And then having sort of conversations after the fact with, Muhammad and a few others, at the time I understood the decision that had to be made. But I think now looking back, there perhaps could have been more things that we could have done to save those folks.
And just to add context, to be honest, Chris, when we hired you, I did not even contemplate layoffs. That's how poorly our company was being managed. And so it wasn't like we were hiring people when we knew we were doing layoffs. It really, the decision and the execution came from the time we joined to the time we did the layoffs. Wow. And it was just so quick and so sudden, because the way the urgency was brought to attention was like, it could be devastating financially if you don't make an execution sooner than later. And it was very, 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 very like, here's the thing. It may have been just a week time from the decision to execution, but that felt like a lifetime from my timeline. it was the worst experience. Like the longest time that I could have ever had is that was the longest week in my life. But at the same time, like it was a very short span from the decision to the execution. And so, yeah, so
Yep.
I think it was just an accident that you were hired and that happened, but it did. And it was not like we were hiring knowingly that we were going to do layoffs. So I just wanted to set that context if I never told you that. So
Got it.
Yeah, I was one of the people who was like privy to what was about to happen, but I do remember how sudden it was. It was like literally like, we need to talk about layoffs. And I was like, oh, okay, we can start planning. And it's like, no, this needs to happen this week. I'm like, when? They're like, this week. Like,
Yeah. It was like a Wednesday.
by next Monday. They're like, I'm
Right.
like, oh, okay. Like that's how sudden it was. I do remember that.
I remember, Jeff, we had to bring people's names to the conversation.
That's why we knew. Yeah, we were part of the
Like,
very quick and
very quick.
urgent. There was this urgency created around it that I still don't necessarily understand. Like I get it, I guess, by the numbers and by the books, but it like Chris said, maybe there's a chance to save some jobs, but even if there wasn't, I felt like there was a chance to take our time and weigh our options a little more. But we were definitely taking guidance from, like who we considered experts. So, these were like we had a C-suite at the time that had seen it all, done it all. And we kind of wanted to build a company that emulated like the businesses that they came from. And so we took their kind of word as gospel, not to put all the blame on them, but I'm saying that's kind of the mindset that we had coming into this. Like, this is a necessary step. We're taking the advice. And I can give the perspective from the other room, because Chris was in the kind of break room area where people were safe.
Jeff, I just want to elaborate something.
Oh, sorry.
Like I think you talked about how we were taking advice from senior leaders and so forth, but at the end of the day, I know that I held the keys to the decision making, and I wanna make sure that I'm able to call out that the buck did stop with me. I made the final decision at the end of the day to go forward with the layoffs, despite the advice, because at the moment in time, I can't blame anybody, but everybody was just doing their job, right? Like in their minds, they were hired to advise me, and they advised me, but I pulled the trigger. So
Sure.
I want to make sure I call that out. I think it's important.
No, I appreciate that. I guess, yeah, I kind of defended you there a little bit, but yeah, absolutely. Thank you. In the other room across the opposite end of the building was a meeting room, a conference room that was relatively crowded because, Mohammed, do you remember the numbers of like how many total people and how many layoffs there were in that?
So we did it. So our offices are located between India and the US. So we did it in multiple waves, but that was the first wave, and that was the US wave. So in totality, we laid off before the end of 2015, almost 100 positions between US and India combined. But that day in the office was almost 16 people out of probably 50 was our size, 50 to 60. And we were laying off 16 people of the US office that we worked together with in the US Houston office.
Right. I remember there was like waves as well. Yeah. But that particular day, those people were in this one conference, crammed into one conference room, and only other people there were a few managers and HR. And so there were these packets, these folders prepared that were labeled with their names, and it had basically their kind of next steps, like health insurance information, like kind of logistical paperwork and things to sign. And then they were basically said, basically in a very, kind of matter of fact way, given the situation, and then kind of sent. The way it was arranged was it was sent for people. It's like, give them the news, and then from here, the next steps is go to your desk, get all your stuff, and you have to leave, like, because everybody else was held off. And this is part of, in my opinion, what makes it the darkest day. It was not just the fact that we had to do it, but how the day kind of played out, right? People had to grab their stuff. They had to leave. They couldn't say bye. They couldn't say, I mean, this is just Monday. So literally they came into work, they got brought into this, and then everyone else is waiting in the break room on the side for everyone to be done. Practically kind of almost in a way escorted out, because they were like kind of made sure they got all their stuff and left, almost like, on paper, like for security reasons, things like that. But these were friends and coworkers and people that wanted to talk about it, wanted to deal with this in their own way, and they were really denied of that. That's what stands out a lot.
Yeah, or even say goodbye, right? So I remember standing. There was a door in our break room that you could see across the building into the side of the space where people were packing their things up. And I remember standing there just quickly watching as people were shuffling out of the room and then walking to their desks. And I turned around and I couldn't watch, because I knew I would not be able to even say goodbye to them. And that was hard to have that separation. And then I remember when we all sort of emerged from that break room, and there was this emptiness, this feeling, like this deathly silence, that these desks were just erased, like snapped out of existence. Like, that's how it felt. And it was such a strange environment. It was such a strange way to let people go. And it was, in our opinion, as we say, an inhumane way to let a team member or team members go. And
I think it was quite dehumanizing. Now that we
agreed,
reflect on it,
looking
it was
back.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and so that's definitely for a multitude of reasons. But I think that the part that really struck me the most was walking back out into that space and then nothing, and trying to kind of pick up the pieces from that point was a challenging thing for our entire organization.
I can tell you that there was so much attention to detail made to that day and that event. And I only say this because there was boxes prepared, there was security guards ready, standing by the elevator. There was like this whole process seemed like it was so perfectly planned for the layoffs. Looking back at it, I can only see that as because it's so common that people knew exactly how to do it, down to the detail. Like, you keep boxes ready to say, you have folders ready to say, this is how you do it, this is how you escort, this is the process. You just got to follow it. You just got to do it. And Mohammed, you are not allowed to be here. You have to go take the team there, and you better not apologize, because apologizing for this could even lead you to showing any type of remorse or apologetic nature can be perceived as weakness, or could open you up to legal exposure. There were so many things that I had to prepare for, but it was so meticulously structured. And I'm part of this. I was part of that planning, and it was just crazy. I don't think we've even had events planned so detailed, and this was meticulously down to the detail, down to the timing, and planning for what could go wrong and how you anticipate for it. It was so much discussion and thought put into it. But at the end of the day, the outcome of it all was just extremely dehumanizing. I can only empathize because I wasn't the one on the receiving end. But yeah, it was just It was definitely a darkest day, for sure.
It's interesting all the planning you're talking about, the like thinking about just how detailed and meticulous it was, and yet none of those plans or details kind of factored in the human element, or none of the plans included how to make people feel, how to help people handle it, how to help people through this, how to do it in a way that made sense to people, or showed care and compassion. None of those were in those meticulous plans.
No, it was advised against. It
Yeah.
was, I recently learned of something called moral injury, and I almost feel like that's kind of what maybe people were felt like, because it's like, it's the process, right? Like, that's the system. This is how it has to happen. But deep down, it's wrong. This is not the right way. Like, I mean, I'm not just talking about decision of layoffs. It's the way it was done, which was more like really impactful, besides the decision. And there's almost like it's left a scar for me on, I never want to ever do that ever again, like, period. And I wasn't even the one on the receiving end. I was the one who executed that whole decision. And deep down, I knew it was not right. I knew it was wrong, but I was like, well, this is how corporations are. This is how businesses are. And so there was this fight of my moral values versus what business rational is. And like, I can tell you, like, I'm scarred. Like, I feel, just even talking about this is like bringing up all kinds of emotions to me right now that I'm okay talking about it now, but I don't want to go back to. But it was a real, like, and that's just me, right? Like, I know, imagine, and I'm a privileged with power. I'm the CEO. I'm not even being impacted by this, like, financially or personally. Like, I'm in a position of power, and I felt that way. And I can only imagine how others perceived it, others felt with this, and even the people who were being let go, what would have gone in their minds about how they feel about Softway, or how they felt about me or Softway, and just the way it was done. Like, it's just injustice. I don't know. Now maybe I'm thinking out too much. But
Like, for me, again, I was in the room that was quote unquote the safe room, and had only been here for 2 weeks. So in my head, what was happening on the other side were these heartfelt, one-on-ones that were going on with the leaders and, those individual employees. So weeks later, when I found out that wasn't what happened, that it was like this mass conference room style, like, tell everybody at the same time, like, I was like, that, I thought that the executives who were advising for that would have known better, because those are horror stories that you hear about in movies, that you hear about in companies that had toxic and really poisonous cultures, didn't care about the people. Like, that heartless sort of way of letting go is something that I felt was a thing of the past inside of corporate America. Like, we've grown from this. Everybody has learned that is not best practice in letting people go from an organization, especially when it's not performance related. This is purely a decision for the business. Like, all the reason more why to let them go with dignity and humanity, and almost have a little bit of appreciation and a reminder that their value is not in what's happening today. And so when, like, that was in my head, like, silly Chris perceiving that was what was happening. So that's why I was like, okay, well, if we're getting the same talking to, and there's this, sort of, as much as Muhammad could muster up the emotion and sort of the humanity and the care, I'm thinking that's the equal and opposite for them. Wasn't the case. And so I remember my rage came not at the situation, but at the advice, and the fact that, like, how are people that are veterans to sort of, the practices of HR in large organizations coming forward and implementing such horrible, I do mean horrible, deplorable, ways of departing someone from an organization, especially when they didn't deserve it. It wasn't performance related. There wasn't like a blow up. There wasn't anything other than people coming to their jobs, trying to do their best work possible. And unfortunately, there not being enough money to make all of the ends meet. And I just feel like even if you don't say your team is like your family, or even if you don't, sort of have, a positive culture, but just the human nature of it all and putting yourself in someone else's shoes, or how would you like to be treated, asking yourself those questions, I just don't see how a experienced professional would actually come forward with that type of advice, knowing that they were in the seat to be influential on the leader who brought them in to receive that advice. And so, maybe I'm holding on to unforgiveness, but like, I couldn't understand anybody who was a part of that committee to advise why they would be quote unquote around at Softway for far too long. Cause I was like, I don't want anything or anyone who will put that forward as a plausible solution to a problem to stay on. Right. And I'll be very honest and clear about that. Like, that is something that I just can't appreciate or support or further in terms of how the business that I work for operates. Like, I refuse to make those types of companies successful. That's just my personal motto. It's like, nope, I'm not giving you my talent so you can do to people what you just did. Like, nope, not doing it.
So we also coined this as our darkest day, just as kind of a landmark in our journey. It kind of anchors kind of the beginning of a lot of personal, cultural growth for Softway, and it kind of serves. We continue talking about the story mainly to serve as a contrasting point as well, to kind of measure how far we've come, or if we've made a difference. I know that, we're not going to dive into this, but I know that we when the pandemic hit, we faced additional difficult, decisions and things that we'd have to do from a business and financial side. And this darkest day story like haunted us in a way that definitely helped us make different, as Muhammad used, particularly making more difficult and very hard decisions around the pandemic. But I remember you basically, after we talked about all the options, you basically refused to go through layoffs again. You said that is not happening this time. We are not, like, the trauma came back, and it wasn't just because trauma, it's just like, we knew that we'd come so far. We knew that we wanted to be better. We knew that we wanted to be different this time around. And I won't dive into details, but that comes up to me as, like, as we talk about kind of how the pain of the darkest day, I also kind of, it brings me to kind of how that lesson sticks with us, haunts us, but helps us continue growing and reminding us, like, what we want to fight for, what we want to get better at.
Agreed.
Yeah. So, this this story was definitely hard to bring up. I think it's kind of it's kind of bringing us to this space, and I want to, like, I guess, make sure we end on, like, that positive side of things, because anytime we've had to bring this up, or if we write about it, talk about it, and recollect it, it's just a really, really awful, rooted in guilt and shame and all these things. And I think there's also a reality to it that helps us kind of come out of it, is that I'm personally very, very proud of the strides we've been able to make since, and being able to weigh that against, just showing how far we've come, and what we take from that in terms of culture, in terms of what we hope we can make right for those going forward, and make, amends and fix what we've done is a huge driving force in our onward kind of journey and quest to build a better workplace for ourselves and for others. So I always take solace in that, because I know I've made you all relive this story today, so I'm feeling a little guilty about that. But at the same time, I think it was really good to share that out, and hopefully people listening heard, a little bit of, resonated a little bit with something that they've heard, they've seen, they've done. I think there is some universal connection to this story that many people can relate to. And hopefully it serves as a bridge to understand kind of exactly what we're trying to fix for ourselves and for the world at large.
Yep. I totally agree. And I think the other sort of benefit that we've gotten out of that moment is the resolve and the commitment to, bringing about love as a business strategy. There's absolutely no one that can come to my face and try and get me to believe something different, because I know what happens when you don't have it. And I think that is a reminder and sort of a reason to come and create this podcast week after week, to come in and sort of help other businesses understand, like, no, you don't understand how dark your business can get if you don't have something like this. And at least being on the path towards it is better than digressing from it, because you don't know what longstanding damage you could do, not just to your company and your culture, but to the humans who you mistreat and who leave now with that taste of what it feels like to be so dehumanized that you couldn't even say goodbye to the people that you work with. That is, to me, one of the most critical reasons why I stay on this mission and why I stay on this journey. And I'm pretty sure I can speak for everybody here to say, we don't want to see this happen to anybody ever again, not just at Softway, but even other businesses. And so, but to me, if that's the positive that comes out of it, that's a positive, right? Like, you can, if you don't like it, you don't like it, but I'm not going to change my mind, my mission, or my focus because you don't understand or don't believe it or don't get it, because I've seen, and we've all seen, the human impacts that happen when you don't have it.
For folks that have joined in the years since this, they hear about this story and they're like, is this a myth? Like, is this a legend? Like, it doesn't, because they're stepping into an organization that is radically transformed. And when they hear the story and when we discuss it or when we write about it or talk about it, they aren't really able to connect to who we are as Softway, because we've been taking these steps to transform our organization and our culture to where this is not something they could ever imagine happening here. And I'm driven by that. I'm motivated by that. That love is the catalyst. And, when we're able to see what could have been, and we're able to learn and grow and adapt and change for the betterment of our teams and the people that will be impacted by that, and that's the whole point. And so in talking about this, it's challenging, but it's also interesting to look back and see how far we've come and how far we still have to go. And I'm definitely in that same space, Chris. I'm motivated and deeply and profoundly driven to make sure that both our organization and as many organizations as we can influence don't ever have to experience something like that.
Thanks. Yeah, absolutely. So we hope this was interesting, to say the least, for you to listen to. We hope you got something out of it, and hope you can take something back with you for your own reflection and introspection. But with that, we'll sign off with a reminder that we are posting episodes every Tuesday. And if there's anything you'd like to cover or like to hear about or elaborate on, let us know. Give us that feedback at softway.com/labs. That's LAABS. And if you enjoyed this content, or if you have any other things to add, please leave that review. 5-star review would be great. Subscribe on Apple and Spotify, all those good things. Share with a friend. And with that, I will sign off and see you all next week. Thank you, Mo. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Frank. Talk soon.